Paul and the Law. In the past, I visited a lot of different churches. In the very distant past, I visited a lot of different churches of many denominations. To support their doctrines, they each used different Paul verses than the next denomination did. Sometimes, though, they'd use the same Paul verse, but use them or interpret them differently. Anyway, it was Paul versus Paul. They would say, we have more Paul verses than the other guys do. They didn't have a problem if Paul didn't seem to agree with Paul. Why the confusion about Paul? How do we get here? Well, first of all, they changed the order of the books: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in the book of Acts. After that, it was James, 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and Jude were next, and then Paul's letters. But 1600 years ago, Jerome, he was the secretary of the Pope, Damasus was his name, was ordered to change the order of the books and put Paul's books first, after the book of Acts, and the other books, James and the others, afterwards, just in front of Hebrews. So Paul was read without hearing the warning by Peter. Our beloved brother Paul, or Shaul, according to the wisdom which has been given to him, has written to you. As in all his letters he speaks concerning these, in which there are some things difficult to understand. Those who are without instruction, that word in the Aramaic, I did a translation just recently from the Aramaic to the English of the New Testament, All Israel Bible, AIV version. And instruction is, most people think, well, what is instruction? It literally, Torah, or the books of books of Moses, are called Torah a lot of times. It doesn't mean direct necessarily law. That's what most people think. It contains a lot of law, but it means primarily direction or instruction. So those who are without instruction or knowledge of the books of Moses, of Torah, are unstable and pervert them, and also the other scriptures, to their own destruction. You therefore, my beloved, knowing this before, guard yourselves so that you will not fall from your pillars, going after the error of those who are lawless. I feel I need to explain a few rabbinic terms, kind of like rabbinic Judaism 101. I have right here, last three on the bottom, works of law, because we're going to run into this. And most people see it as works of the law because people have added words that aren't in the text. It works of law means performing works according to the laws of the Pharisees or rabbis. Performing works according to the laws of the Pharisees, rabbis, works of law. Now another term, under law, under the interpretation and observance of the laws of the Pharisees and rabbis. Under law, under the interpretation and observance of the laws of the Pharisees and rabbis. And the one more word is halakha, like from the word halek, how to walk. The collective body of Jewish religious law and forming especially the legal part of the Talmud. These three terms, we're going to see them in the New Testament under Paul's writings. But first of all, we need to know why Paul, why God chose someone that so many people can't understand or interpret different ways. Paul was chosen by the Father and the Son for the task of taking the gospel to those among the nations, as well as to the Gentiles, to the nations. Paul was uniquely qualified to explain issues involving halakha, how one should walk out the commandments, especially as it applies to new situations like Jews and non-Jews interacting and fellowshipping together, which rabbinic law had mostly forbidden. Many translators, not understanding these issues Paul was dealing with and talking or deciding about, rendered Paul's words according to their own misunderstanding and doctrine. And some translators, it seems, rendered Paul according to what they wanted him to mean. Instant proof text. Now, when I was translating from Aramaic to English, something happened where the Lord showed me in 4 of the letters of Paul, or books, a subtle altering of what Paul said was happening. A subtle altering of what Paul said regarding the law of God and the gospel of righteousness. Regarding the law of God and the gospel of righteousness. This, again, I say, was in 4 letters, 4 books of his, one of which was 1 Corinthians chapter 9. For context, I read a few verses prior to the verse in question. In verse 1, chapter 1, verse 22 and 23 and 24, all the way to 26. For Jews ask for signs, and Arameans, or Greeks, seek wisdom. In the Aramaic, it says Arameans. In the Greek, it says Greeks. Basically, Gentiles. For Jews ask for signs, and Arameans, Greeks, seek wisdom. But we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling stone to the Jews, and to Arameans or Greeks foolishness. But to them who are called Jews and Arameans or Greeks, Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser. For the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. For you see also your calling, my brothers, that not many among you are wise after the flesh, and not many among you are powerful, and not many among you are of a noble birth. So he's addressing the Jews and the non-Jews coming into the faith of Yeshua and the God of Israel. They're both being called, both Jews and Gentiles, and they have a calling. But according as the Lord Maria is the word for Lord, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, has distributed to everyone as God has called him, so let him walk. Again, that word halakha. And thus in the assembly, so I direct. If a man is circumcised, has been called, let him not turn to uncircumcision. And if in uncircumcision he has been called, let him not be circumcised. For circumcision is not anything, nor uncircumcision, but the observances of the commandments of God. Let every man remain in the calling in which he has been called. If you called when you were circumcised, or if you were called when you're uncircumcised. For while free of all men, to all men I subject myself, that the many I may gain. Here we go. These are the 2 verses in 1 Corinthians 9 that were slightly altered. I have the King James at the top, and it's about 99% of the Bibles have these errors in the same way, and compare it to the AIV. And unto the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might gain the Jews. To them that are under the law, sounds like Torah or law of Moses, under the law, as under the law, that I might gain them that are under the law. To them that are without law, as without law, being not without law to God, but under the law to Christ, that I might gain them that are without law. Now let me read this the way actually Paul wrote it. And I became with the Jews as a Jew, that the Jew I may gain, and with them who are under law, not under the law, he didn't write that, who, with them who are under law, I became as one under law. Again, this means rabbinic law, that them who are under law I may gain. And to those who have not law, I became as one without law, while I'm not without law unto God, but in law of Christ, that them who also have not law I may gain. We have a note here at the bottom that remember, those who have not law or without law means not being under rabbinic law. And those that are under law, not under the law, under law, are under rabbinic supervision or rabbinic um, leadership and direction in halakha. In the Greek, I look at that verse 20 and 21 right here, and I became to the Jews as a Jew, that Jews I might gain, and to those under law. You notice there's no the there, under law, as under law. There's no the under the law. There's no the under the law. Talking about to the Jews to gain them, they who are under law, I became under law. That those under law, not under the law, that those under law I might gain, and those without law, not being without law of God, but under law of Christ. Again, not under the law, that I might gain with those without law. I became to the weak as weak, that the weak I might gain. To all I become all things, that in some case I may save some. And this was that other last verse that we just read. And the weak, and not weak, infirmed, or but weak in faith. That's a context. So summary, we saw in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, 20 and 21, they changed where Paul was talking about Gentiles and Jews. First Jew, he says, they are under law, not under the law. They are under law. I became as one under law that I might reach them. And I, to the Gentile who's not under law, he's without law or not under law, he's not under rabbinic law. I became as one not under rabbinic law to reach them. This change has changed what Paul said, and without this understanding, translators are changing it to under the law. In other words, Paul makes Paul speaking against the Torah, the law of Moses, when he's not even talking about that. So also, like Yeshua said, but if you will enter life, keep the commandments. Also in Revelation it says, here is the patience of the holy ones who keep the commandments of Allah, God in Aramaic is Allah, and the faith of Yeshua.